Yeah, my name's Nicholas Goulding and I'm the Reform UK candidate here in the new constituency of Chester North and Neston.
Now, in all your campaigning leading up to this point, how have you got your feedback? How's your feedback been from your area?
Well, I've been bowled over with the positive response we've been getting. One of the things I find from local people, both up here in Neston but also down in Chester, is that people are fed up with both of the main existing parties, with both Labour and Conservative. Their supporters from years gone by have found that their parties have left them. So whether you're a Conservative who thinks the Conservative Party isn't very conservative, or you're a Labour supporter from the past who thinks that the Labour Party doesn't understand working people or their concerns, you've both got those frustrations. And Reform UK is setting out an agenda that we find is bringing people from across the political divide and uniting them into a common sense set of proposals.
I was just speaking to Ken in the Wirral West area. He said that part of the strategy for reform is obviously recently Conservatives haven't had a great outcome. He suggests that maybe overall Labour may get in next, and then people will soon figure out that Labour is not a good answer, and therefore who's left over, and reform could be the answer for the British public maybe in the next general election.
Well, that's certainly how people saw a possible strategy at the start of the election campaign. But to be honest, I've found the Conservative Party is falling to bits all on its own without any push for anyone else. Every time you look round, they seem to have shot themselves in the foot again. And actually, the place we're getting the most positive feedback, which might surprise some people, is on those traditionally Labour council estates where I am bowled over by the positive response I get. I think that we are going to surprise a lot of people by the level of support we get from Labour voters up here.
So in the areas and difference between Chester and up here towards Neston, where have you found the most change from going from Labour Conservative to Reform? Where have you had the most positive response back from?
The most positive response I've had across the whole constituency has been in Blacon. In Blacon, which you would have thought of as a traditionally Labour area, I see virtually no evidence of Labour, and I'm constantly being greeted by people who are really enthusiastic to vote for reform. But it's not just Blacon, it's similar sort of estates across the constituency. We see a same sort of response. And in the perhaps more conservative areas, people may be a little bit more reserved about expressing their support. We certainly do see them wrestling with the question as to who should they vote for, and I think a lot of them are coming across to us because they're so frustrated with the Conservative Party as it stands at the moment.
So you think that the switch over is greater than maybe first predicted at this moment in time?
I think that's true. I think the Conservatives recognise that their party is on the way down, particularly up in the north, and so I expect a significant amount of the previous Conservative voters to put the cross for Reform and Nigel Farage, who speaks a lot of the language that they like to hear. But by the same token, a lot of former Labour supporters engage with our issues too. The fact that too many people have come into the country in the last few years, 10 million people since Tony Blair came to power. That's like parachuting a whole city of London back onto the country without any extra provision for housing, for health, and that's hardly any surprise that people struggle with those services, particularly housing, but also health and education. If you put that many extra people into the country, you're bound to have a challenge.
In terms of tradesmen and local people doing tradesmen, now obviously in the past 10, 20, 30 years, a lot of people have come over from continental Europe with their skilled trades over here. Now, since of course Brexit's happened, a lot of these people may have gone back again, but there's a distinct lack of people, young people who have learned trades growing up. I was lucky, I was one of them who learned a trade, but a lot more people are going to university rather than learning the trades. Is that something that Reform want to bring back to apprenticeships for the likes of young people, to get them into proper, what we call proper work, as in the electricians and the plumbers that everybody needs in whichever country you live in? We all need them, but having our own people to carry that out for us with young people.
the training of young people so they can move through and develop into a range of different careers is absolutely central to what we're trying to do. It's to build an economy which builds wealth for ordinary people, and that does mean providing the apprenticeships and training places on the basic trades like your plumber and your carpenter and your bricklayer, but it also means investing in industries so that the skilled jobs in the factories where you have high technology that need workers who can have the skills that are needed to actually boost our exports. And same in the health service, where we have many young people who have the educational qualifications to go and train to be doctors and nurses, but we aren't providing the training places that they need. And we would dramatically expand those training places. So if you're properly qualified to go on those courses, you should be able to get there. And again, having more people doing practical skills and perhaps less of an emphasis on universities is really where I think we can improve the education and training for young people.
Now, a lot of people, because of Nigel Farage, will link the UKIP party with the Reform UK party. Now, what are the differences between the two parties? Are they essentially the same, or is there a different strategy behind them? Or
Well, UKIP was a party that was focused on the United Kingdom withdrawing from the European Union, and that really is yesterday's battle. Reform UK is working on an agenda to actually reform, as the name says, UK, and that wasn't really something that UKIP was focused on. They thought
it's the next step.
It's the next step, and so it's different in that it's got a different goal. And also, Reform UK is able to bring in a broader set of people than UKIP perhaps did in the past, because very many more people from the other parties are now coming on board. So we have a breadth of support that UKIP wasn't able to reach. Now, UKIP did well with their 4 million votes at their peak, but Reform UK look like they're going to more than double the support that UKIP got. So we can see we're reaching out to a broader set of people.
So over the last several years, certainly since COVID, taxes has gone up, and the government's been trying to take money off people back into the government. How does Reform plan on getting that money back to the people of the country rather than the governments of the country?
We've got three main ways that ordinary people will see more money in their pocket. Firstly, we will raise the tax threshold so they won't pay income tax until they're earning £20,000. Secondly, by scrapping the various green subsidies, we'll be able to reduce their fuel bills, and on top of which we have a plan to introduce small-scale nuclear plants and to re-energise North Sea oil production that will push down the oil prices, and that means that on their electricity and gas bills, people will see further reductions coming down the road. And finally, housing costs and the availability of housing are a dreadfully important part of people's budgets. Those 10 million extra people, a city of London in a decade that have arrived in the country, have pushed the price and availability of housing through the roof, so that ordinary people cannot get on the housing ladder, cannot afford to buy housing, and by tackling those numbers, we will see a significant improvement in people's ability to get on the housing ladder and to find suitable rented housing.
I've recently spoke to Dr. Jane Turner from the Green Party, and she talked about electric cars, how they're maybe not the final answer, but how does Reform see electric cars as part of this green policy?
Well, electric cars, and particularly the subsidies for electric cars, are a vanity project which serves the assumptions of the rich elite. But actually, if you look at it purely from an environmental point of view, they're sucking out precious metals and various rare earths from around the world. There isn't enough of it to actually work. We haven't even got the electricity to supply all the cars if we were to move across to electricity. And ordinary people are voting with their feet. They're not buying those electric cars because there are very good reasons for not doing so. So even from the point of view of those who prioritise the environment, electric cars are not the way forward.
Another thing on the environment side of things and we've recently done a video about this in the last year or so, is about the 20 mile per hour zones around the country that obviously many people are not very happy about. Would that be something that reform would scrap because it's not really doing what it's supposed to have thought to have done?
With 20-mile-an-hour limits, we need to be sensible about it. There are some locations, closed cul-de-sacs where children may be playing, where it's an entirely appropriate speed limit. But where the 20 mph limit is applied across broad areas, it isn't appropriate, it doesn't help the flow of traffic, it hinders local people going around their business, and it's bad for local businesses.
Right, so what's a reform's policy on the country's defence and security?
Well, reform is very clear that the defence of the country and the protection of its people should be right at the top of the list of government priorities. We would restore defence expenditure to a real 2.5%, not all the smoke and mirrors that the present government applies to it. And over a 6-year period, we would look to moving it up to 3%. That will give us the resources to invest both in our servicemen, but also in our overall defence capability. It is shocking that a private soldier who is prepared to put his life on the line is paid less than an Amazon driver, and we would correct that. It's also wrong that the way successive governments have allowed the law to develop, soldiers who make decisions in positions of a lot of stress are subjected to lawsuits years into the future. I'm thinking about the Northern Ireland veterans and from incidents in Iraq. And frankly, people who have no idea what the circumstances are shouldn't be sitting in judgment over people who have been out putting their lives on the line for the country. And we would change the law not to remove all responsibility from our servicemen, but to ensure that the way it's judged reflects the realities of the service they're doing. And we would look after our veterans. We would provide a new department with a specific focus to ensuring that the veterans receive the support that they deserve. And we'd invest in the housing for our servicemen. So, for example, at the moment, you've got housing that they were planning in an airbase in Yorkshire. They were planning to put refugees in, and it was rejected by the lawyers representing the refugees because they thought the accommodation wasn't up to standard. And yet we previously had our servicemen living in that accommodation, and they should have fit for purpose accommodation. But on top of the actual armed forces, we need to be investing more in our industries that supply the armed forces, both vehicles, ships, aircraft, and the whole range of electronic and high-tech industries, drones now coming through. We need this country to be a leader across a whole range of defence-related products that will not only help our defence, but will drive high-skilled jobs and prosperity in the communities where those production facilities are located. Okay. And another thing to add is that Reform UK is very clear on the various issues relating to the so-called woke agenda. We're very clear on the difference between a man and a woman, and we'd make sure that the law ensured that female spaces were for females, female sport was for females, and that the education system doesn't peddle any lies that differ from that. So we would be for the reality of it. And on top of that, we would be for bringing back the basic values of fairness that we would expect in our policing, so that there is even-handed policing rather than the partial policing we've seen of some of the protests of recent days that many people will have seen on YouTube and so on. And we would stop the intimidation of our Jewish community here. People who wish to support Palestine have a perfect right to express their view. They do not have a right to do it in a way that intimidates a significant part of our community, and the police should take action to stop them from doing that. We also want to be open to immigrants. We are not an anti-immigrant party. We are against the numbers of people who come into this country. It's not the individual, it's the 10 million extra that we've got that is the problem. But those immigrants that come here need to integrate with our society and to share our values. And we would also put in place measures, encouragement, so that when people arrive here, they're clear about those British values and they're encouraged to accept and work within the existing framework of the British value set. And if they wish to pursue another agenda, frankly, that's not welcome for us.
So here we are in Neston town centre with the up-and-coming general election coming along. What's your advice to the people of your constituency to do on voting day, both here and down North Chester or anywhere around? Okay. How would you advise them at this point?
What I say to people when they ask me about their vote is to consider that this is a once-in-a-100-year chance to send a real message to the political system that very many people believe have let them down. For the Conservatives, they can see the party that they supported in the past falling to pieces in front of their eyes. We don't need to help them. They manage to do that themselves, both with the way they shoot themselves in the foot, but also because of the myriad of broken promises that they have. And the Labour Party is not reflecting the priorities of ordinary people. They've given up listening to ordinary people. And both of those parties are not really fit for your vote. You should, this time, given the way the polls go, vote with your heart and vote for what you believe in. If you really want a change in this country, this is your opportunity to get it. So I would urge you to vote for the Reform Party.
Great advice. So thank you very much for talking to us today.
My pleasure. Thank you
Good
very
luck
much.
as well. Cheers out.